Happy birthday, Westridge. If you've been around for a while, I know what you're thinking. If it's not a snowstorm, a holiday, or a time change Sunday, what's Gordon doing here? I got to say, Westridge, you've grown up to be a beautiful young adult. I knew you when you were just this tall. And I was thinking about that this week. I first met you in the fall of 2003 when Pastor Darren called me up to come lead you in a capital campaign that would raise the money to get out of the community college and to get to this place. And I distinctly remember it. It was a small group of leaders, and we were meeting in a decrepit old farmhouse somewhere here. I don't know. I don't even know where it was. Is it Walmart today? Is that what it is? Okay. Look, I'm a little rusty, so don't start heckling me this early, okay? Just cut me that much slack. That's all I'm asking of you. And so this broken down farmhouse, and I distinctly remember the leader. Some of you are in this room and you know who you are. Had this deer in the headlight look in your face. Like, where's all this money going to come from? And I said, you're going to give it. That's where it's going to come from. And we owe a great debt of gratitude to those people because we stand on their backs today. We're here because of them, primarily. And then, I think it was about a decade ago, seriously, it was about 10 years ago, I got into the regular rotation of being a teaching pastor here. And I could spend the rest of my time telling you about harrowing stories on the Jane Addams Tollway. Road construction, snow, ice, truck drivers texting. But my favorite story, I think, is the time we went down Ogden, we got on the Kennedy, we're starting to barrel our way towards Westridge. I think it was in July. And we came to a complete stop on the highway, on the Kennedy Expressway. There had been a traffic fatality earlier that morning, and they were still investigating it. And I mean, I wasn't 5 miles into my 45-mile trip. And here we are sitting on the Kennedy Expressway, and I'm thinking, wow, surely this is going to break up pretty quickly. And people are this is one of those things where people are getting outside their car and looking around, like, I can't believe this. So I get on the phone with Pastor Darren. Compassionate, kind, understanding Pastor Darren. I said, Darren, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this. You're going to have to do something else. No, you're going to be able to make it. Don't worry. You're going to be able to make it. I go, okay, but I'm sitting here on the expressway. Oh, we'll move things around the service. You're going to be able to do this. I go, okay, I'm still not moving. So finally, we get by on the shoulder of the road, and it's past 9 o'clock now, and I'm still on the highway. So, once again, our compassionate founding pastor is on the phone. I'm saying, Darren, I think I'm still 30 minutes out. You can make it in 15. Come on, I know you can do this. I go, the sign's saying 30 minutes. No, you can do it in 30. We move things around. You'll be the last thing in the program. So, now I've been on the road an hour and a half now. So, finally, I phone him and I say, okay, we're on Randall Road. I'll be there pretty quick. He goes, I'll meet you in the parking lot with the microphone. I said, okay. And he said, and you don't have time to go to the bathroom either. So I'm thinking, here's our compassionate founding pastor advocating that I break every traffic law in the state of Illinois and trying to regulate my bodily fluids before I get up and preach the word of life to you. I got to say, of all the places that I've spoken, where I've served 20 years in ministry, this has been the most fulfilling one. And it's because of you guys. Because of your humor, because of your acceptance, because of your authenticity, and that's what I want to talk to you about today, authenticity. But before I do, I just want to say I'm grateful that God has allowed me to be a small thread in the 20-year tapestry called Westridge. Thanks a lot. So I don't know whether it's new or not, but the word spin has come to have a particular meaning in our vocabulary. Usually it's in a political context. And I think it refers to bending the truth, to shaping the story to be the most beneficial to the person doing the spinning. The important thing to spinners is not the truth. It's shading the message to what the listener wants to hear. And while politicians may be professional spinners, I suspect they're not the only ones spinning the truth. I'm guessing there are plenty of amateur spinners out there too, and I'm guessing there are some church spinners. People who pretend to always be happy, always be moral, always be trouble-free. People whose only thought is, what would Jesus do 24/7, 365? Always humming a praise chorus. Always ready to help someone in need. Chirpy, cheerful, and chippy. Just like Pastor Darren. When I was a full-time pastor, I was always reluctant to tell people I was a pastor. And it wasn't because I was ashamed to be a pastor. It's because the minute I told them that, their behavior changed, and I hated that. All of a sudden, things got artificial between us. And I never thought being a pastor made me a better person than anyone else on the planet. And I didn't want to be treated that way because I knew I wasn't. I remember one particular time I was playing golf and I got paired up with a stranger. And we played a few holes and he was swearing after every bad shot he hit, throwing his clubs. On about the fifth tee box, he asked me what I did. And I said, Pastor. What? What do you do? I'm a pastor. Well, by the seventh tee box, he was singing Amazing Grace while he waited on the foursome in front of us. All this stands in stark contrast to integrity. Integrity is about holding our lives together so that we're the same person inside and out, backward and forward. Integrity goes beyond being honest or telling the truth. It's living a transparent life. Now, before I go on into the rest of this message, let me just tell you what the transparent life is not. It's not spilling your guts to everyone you meet. That's what counselors and confidants, and for that matter, spouses are for. The transparent life is about owning our own stories, not pretending to be someone else, not spinning our story to be smarter than we are, dumber than we are, richer than we are, poorer than we are, better than we are, or worse than we are. Integrity is owning the story that God has given us to write. Transparency is the release of all the masks that we're tempted to wear. It's not having one mask for one occasion and another mask for another occasion. It's being comfortable living inside the skin that God has given us. It's the end of pretense for ego's sake. A woman brought her son to Gandhi because he was eating too much sugar. And despite her vigilance, the boy could not seem to give up sugar. The woman asked Gandhi if he would speak to the boy about the problem. And Gandhi replied, "No, bring him back in a week." And in a week, the woman returned and once again petitioned Gandhi to speak to her son about his habit of eating too much sugar. And Gandhi welcomed the boy and had the discussion about giving up sugar. And the boy seemed to be affected by Gandhi's counsel, and the woman thanked him deeply. But as she turned to leave, she asked him one final question: "Why did you see him today and not last week?" And Gandhi replied, "Because last week, I was eating too much sugar." You can't lead someone where You haven't been. Living a life of integrity is harder than it sounds. Even godly people struggle. And perhaps one of the most poignant examples of integrity in all the Bible is found in the account of King David. When you think about his biography, there were so many distinctly different chapters in his story. There's the shepherd boy who had faith in God to slay Goliath. There's a next chapter where he's the warrior who leads his army into battle. A third chapter where he's the faithful friend to Jonathan. A fourth chapter where he's the respectful servant to King Saul, even though he didn't deserve it. And then there's the chapter where he's the sacrificial giver who helped raise the money for the temple. And there's the lying, murdering, adulterous David. Here's how the Bible describes it. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. And from the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. And David sent someone to find out about her. And the man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. But it gets worse. Later, David arranged to have Uriah killed and went on about his life as if no one would care. It was as if he was one person in private and another person in public. And so God sent the prophet Nathan to confront David and to point out what David was denying when he looked in the mirror, that he had become someone he didn't want to admit to himself. And so God used the prophet Nathan to show David a part of his story that he didn't want to see. Now, to David's credit, he received Nathan's rebuke. He changed his ways. But in the process, part of his life spun into chaos. Have you ever had chapters in your life where it felt like in this chapter right now, things just seem to be in chaos? This is the time you can heckle me now if you want to. Okay. Only 3 people are being honest here. We're in a chaotic chapter in our life right now. We're relocating to St. Louis. Chicago just didn't have enough riots for me. Actually, it's to be closer to my work. And it's just chaotic. We've been in the West Loop for 12 and a half years, and it just feels like chaos to us right now. David had a time of chaos after this little episode. The most immediate consequence was the death of the son born to he and Bathsheba. How much better to own our own stories from the beginning. I'd like to suggest to you that, like David, we own our stories a chapter at a time. And I want to walk you through just a few common chapters in our biography. Chapter 1, we own the hand we've been dealt. We're not created equal. We're equally loved by God, but we're not created equal. The hand we've been dealt has to do with those things in our life over which we have no control. And those things aren't the same for everyone. Integrity begins with owning the hand we've been dealt, just like in a card game. Not everyone is dealt the same hand. But integrity is accepting the hand we've been dealt and making the best of it. I know you wanted to get a better card, and you didn't. That's the hand you've been dealt. I had nothing to do with the country in which I was born, the specific time in history in which I was born, to whom I was born, the language I was taught growing up, the socioeconomic conditions in which I was raised, the physical health or lack thereof when I was born, the educational opportunities afforded me in early childhood. I didn't have anything to do with those things. That was the hand I was dealt. For example, I was born with allergies and asthma. And I lived on a dirt road in front of a hayfield with a dad who chain smoked in a small house. And I wondered as a child, how come I have trouble breathing all the time? You've got your own story about the hand you've been dealt. Those things in your life over which you had no control. Let me just comment on one that I know we all have in common. To begin with, we were dealt our parents. And you can pretend they were perfect and perpetuate the cover-up, or you can smolder in anger that won't go away, or I suggest you own the hand you've been dealt. We were stuck with whomever we got, and there's nothing to do but get on with our stories. Whether your childhood was a gift or a nightmare, all you can do today is own it and forgive when and where it's necessary. Our parents are the only parents God will ever give us, and the raw material we got from them is the only grist we will ever have for grinding out our stories. Chapter number 2. Own our wounds. King David certainly had his wounds. He was hunted down like a fugitive in the early part of his career, unjustly. His best friend on earth, Jonathan, was killed. Sometimes, somewhere in our stories, we're bound to get hurt. The odds are, somewhere in the story, pain will grab us in its claws, and it will pin us down. It will tear at our flesh. It will pierce our hearts. And whether a loss or betrayal caused our wound, most of us are wounded, forever wounded, and to disown our wounds would be to be untrue to ourselves. One of the things I love about Westridge and its authenticity is there are no places, no pedestals for superstar pastors here. If you happen to bump into a superstar pastor, you can quote me on this. There's only one way down off a pedestal. And so rather than pretending to be a superstar pastor, pastors are, as Henry Nouwen called them, the wounded healers. That would be the highest title I could ever aspire to have. C.S. Lewis writes in A Grief Observed about the death of his wife, "I shall walk again, but I shall never again be biped." A bit less intellectual but relevant, Don Draper says in an early episode of The Mad Men, nostalgia is the pain from an old wound. We can't move on from a suffering chapter of our story without carrying the wounds with us into the next chapter. The pain of one chapter becomes the scar of the next. Forgiveness doesn't take away the scar. We own our wounds in order to better help other people overcome theirs. We're the wounded healers. Chapter number 3. We own our dark side. Here we are, David, a man, the Bible says, a man after God's own heart. Someone who had a pure devotion to God. Someone who could step out with great faith and generosity. Someone who could also commit adultery and murder. And if we're going to write an honest story, we've got to factor the dark side in any inventory of ourself. Good people are always a mix of faith and fear, of good and bad, of virtue and vice. I've got mine. And you've got yours. I'd rather talk about yours. I'm always a little frightened by church spinner types and superstar pastor types who pretend to never have struggled with their dark side or to propose they've overcome it completely in this lifetime. If a man like David struggled with his dark side, I'm a little skeptical if you don't. Let's not pretend we're the exception when we own our story, when we own our dark side. Confess it when appropriate. We free ourselves from the constant energy drain of trying to be someone we're not. And we disarm the dark side by bringing it out into the light. Chapter 4. We own our commitments. We start new chapters of our story by making significant commitments. We are, in fact, the sum total of all the things to which we are committed. And if we don't have the courage to own our commitments and the courage to make new commitments, then our story loses its narrative. It begins to drift. And we begin to lose touch with who we really are. Maybe today, you've commitments that you're no longer owning. I don't know. Maybe it's a commitment to your spouse, to your children, your financial stewardship, your job. Maybe it's a commitment to this 20-year-old church that you need to renew, that you need to revive. And you need to get back to those commitments and own them. You've made commitments, and keeping them is what creates integrity. Maybe there are some new commitments you need to make today. Maybe there are some new chapters you need to begin writing. Maybe you need to get out of the chapter of chaos into a new chapter. Maybe this church can help. Having a story to write is why we were born. I think owning our story and dedicating it to the glory of God is why we're here. And I believe that which ultimately made David such a role model was that he never gave up on the fact that God never gave up on him. If you can't hold on to anything else, hold on to that. You may give up on yourself. Others may have given up on you. Don't ever forget, God has never given up on you. No matter where you've been, what you've done, how you've tried to hide it. He's never given up on you. Psalm 51 was written after the prophet Nathan had confronted David about his adultery and murder. It goes like this. Soak me in your laundry and I'll come out clean. Scrub me and I'll have a snow-white life. Tune me into foot-tapping songs. Set these once broken bones to dancing. Don't look too close for blemishes. Give me a clean bill of health. God, make a fresh start for me. Shape a Genesis week from the chaos of my life. I talked to a retired pastor a while ago at a convention. And he was older. And we were just chatting, and he said, you know, decades ago I started a church outside Las Vegas. And it grew, and we were reaching all kinds of people. And then he stared me in the eyes, and he said, you know what happened? One day the board called me in and said, you're bringing in too much transient trash to this church. You're fired. Talk about a bunch of church spinners. The morality of the best of us is no more than transient trash in God's eyes. He told the story in such a way that it was clear. He was owning it. It was nostalgic, the pain from an old wound. But the anger was gone. He was glad for the Genesis week God brought out of the chaos. Because he knew that I knew that today, that's the largest church in the Las Vegas Valley with over 20,000 members. Maybe you're tired of spinning your life story. Come clean. Admit the uglier parts of the story. Own up to who you are and where you've been. Clear up some things with God and others. Maybe now it's time for a brand new you. Maybe now you'll want to start by asking God to create a Genesis week out of the chaos of our life.